That's fine. That's fine. You can always Dropbox it to me later.
The room's open.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's just going to be a few more minutes here before we get started. I just wanted to come on quickly and just let everybody know that the event will begin shortly. We're just going to give people a few more minutes here to join, as I'm seeing lots of people still enter the event. So we'll be starting at about 7:03, 7:04 in about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, thanks. Good evening, and welcome to the Better Book Club event number 4. This is presented by At Bay Press and the Manitoba Government Safe at Home program. We'd like to thank the Manitoba government for all their support in making this possible. And of course, to all the attendees who are here with us tonight to be a part of this book club. What's great about this is that this is a little different than a book launch in that it is truly just a book club, and that you can expect some spoilers tonight. This will not be quite like a book club where nobody's read the book. A lot of you will have already read the book, and for those of you that signed up would have received a free copy of the ebook so that you could read it in advance, or at least begin to read it in advance of the event. Before we get started though, I'd like to just acknowledge that we are located, or at least broadcasting here in Winnipeg on Treaty 1 territory, which is also the homeland of the Métis Nation. And so we're very thankful to be able to live in that situation, and we're thankful for that. In addition to that, a few housekeeping things. For those that are new to Zoom, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you have some options available to you. If you run your mouse over it, you'll be able to see that you can raise your hand, and raising your hand allows you to ask a question live. So we will actually unmute you, and if you want, you can even come on video and ask Brad a question in person live, or you can type your question into the Q&A, which is another option there. And then, I'm being corrected by Ariel Gordon here that says that only audio, not video, which is fine. And then you can also type a question in the Q&A. And then lastly, your other option is that there is a chat. And if you click on chat at the bottom toolbar, a chat session will pop up on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can type a message in there. You can also type whatever you'd like to the rest of the panelists, the rest of the attendees, and they'll see that as well. So there's a bunch of options for you to participate tonight, and we hope that you do, because Brad is ready for all of your questions. And with that, I think it's time to both introduce Brad and the book. So let's start first with Brad Smith. Brad is an internationally acclaimed novelist and screenwriter, and he is the author of 12 novels, including The Return of Kid Cooper, winner of the 2019 Spur Award from the Western Writers of America. And One-Eyed Jacks was also shortlisted for the Dashiell Hammett Award, one of my all-time favorite writers, and All Hat, which was adapted to a feature film. Smith's writing draws on his wellspring of experiences working across Canada, the USA, and Africa at a variety of jobs, including railway signalman, carpenter, bartender, truck driver, ditch digger, school teacher, farmer, maintenance electrician, and roofer. He now lives in a 90-year-old farmhouse in southern Ontario. The Goliath Run is the book that we will be talking about tonight. And for those that haven't read it, you're in for a real treat. I envy you. When a deranged loner kills 26 people in a Pennsylvania schoolyard, the country is stunned and devastated. Among those catatonic with grief is Jo Matheson, an organic farmer who has lost her goddaughter in the shooting. Sam Jackson, an egotistical right-wing TV talking head, has sliding ratings and faces imminent cancellation. He arrives in Pennsylvania, and during a rant, he blames the parents of the dead children. He intends the tirade to be his last salvo, but incredibly, his ratings climb, while Jo watches from her farmhouse in upstate New York, incensed. Sam rides the wave, shouting that it's time to take the country back from the left-wing weaklings who don't have the courage to protect their children. When he is asked to run for Congress, he accepts and amplifies his message. Watching these developments in horror, Jo finally decides there is actually something she can do. She kidnaps Sam's 10-year-old daughter. That's the Goliath Run. Welcome, Brad Smith.
Hi, Matt.
How's it going tonight?
Good. I think it's a little warmer here than it is in Winnipeg, from what I hear.
I think everybody can say that, Brad. It's warmer everywhere than in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Right now, it's in Winnipeg right now. We're in the true deep freeze. I believe we're in the minus 30s tonight. And
Don't forget your sunscreen, then.
yeah, that's just it. Yeah, this is we're actually right in the middle of a Winnipeg summer right now. So this is what we're used to. Yeah, so why don't we jump right into this, Brad? We'll get started with the program tonight. I think the first thing that we should probably do is have you read from the book the section that you've opted to read or elected to read tonight, so that and here's a shot of the book, the beautiful hardcover. Oh, my screen is glitching a bit there. Hold on. I guess there we go. The Goliath Run. That's a shot of it right there. Brad, what have you got for us tonight to read? What section are you reading? So
I'm going to read a little bit to try to give you an idea with the Sam Jackson character.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, I'm wearing my New York Yankee cap because I know my sister-in-law Lisa is watching, and she's a huge New York Yankee fan.
Oh, well, we'll forgive her for that.
No, that's total fiction.
Okay.
She cheers for the Toronto team, the Blue something. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, that would be my team as well.
Okay, we're going to talk about Sam Jackson a little bit.
Yeah, we are. Okay, what page are we reading from, Brad?
43.
Okay.
Now, Sam is he's a right-wing TV talking head. He's sort of like a Rush Limbaugh or Bill O'Reilly type of guy, and he likes to be controversial. He likes to tear people down to build himself up. He doesn't care much about the truth. He only cares about himself. And so in this short scene, he's going to be interviewing a guy named Jason Wells, who's a up-and-coming politician running for office for the first time. He's a black guy from a black neighborhood, and he really doesn't know Sam that well. So you're going to meet Jason Wells. You're going to meet Sam Jackson. And you're also going to meet Sam's TV producer, a woman named Renata, who is Sam's producer, but she's a little more than Sam's producer too. Jason Wells was shorter than Renata had expected. She's seen his picture online, of course, and watched videos of him being interviewed on some local news shows, but for some reason, she'd imagined him to be a big man. He was maybe 5'7" though, but he was built like a middleweight boxer, which he was at one time, according to Wikipedia. At this moment, he was in a different ring, sitting across from Sam Jackson in the studio. They were taping the show in the morning because Sam had to fly to Texas that afternoon to receive an award for something or other. Renata couldn't recall what. He was always being feted by one right-wing group or another, and he nearly always showed up if a free first-class ticket was provided. The first segment was innocuous and predictable, with Sam going out of his way to welcome the newcomer to the political scene. To someone tuning in for the first time, someone who didn't know better, he was acting like a kindly mentor to the young politician. Of course, Renata knew better. They were just back from a commercial now, and the gloves were about to come off. Renata wondered if young Wells knew what was coming. "You've hit the ground running, haven't you?" Sam said to start. Wells nodded. "There's a lot of people to reach." "So you grew up in Bed-Stuy?" Sam asked. "I did." "Interested in politics growing up?" Sam asked. "Not at all," Wells said. He was relaxed and loose. He wore a dress shirt and gray slacks, no tie. His hair was clipped short, and he wore thin, stylish glasses. He was a good-looking guy. "Well, what were you interested in?" Sam asked. "I don't know, the usual things." "I don't know," Sam said. "I don't know. I didn't grow up in a black neighborhood in the 90s. "Did you play sports?" "Yeah." "What about drugs?" he asked. "What about drugs?" Wells replied. Sam smiled. "These economical replies won't serve you well on the Hill, sir. Didn't anybody ever tell you that politicians are long-winded? Let's try this another way. Did you do drugs growing up?" "Yes." "Did you sell them?" There was no hesitation from Wells. "Yes. I was convicted in 1999 of selling an ounce of grass to an undercover agent." Sam pretended to be surprised. "You were convicted of selling marijuana?" Wells laughed out loud. "Come on now. You're going to tell me this is news to you? What, nobody around here knows how to Google?" Oh, I'm sure somebody does, Sam said. I'm kind of a Luddite. Yeah, right, Wells said. I was 20 years old and I made a mistake. Now, you've been very critical of President Trump's healthcare policy, Sam said. Why is that? The president doesn't have a healthcare policy, Wells replied. Obamacare needed tweaking, not gutting. It was too damn expensive, Sam said. I know it was expensive, but that's the nature of the beast, Wells told him. If you look at the Canadian system, the Norwegian example, it's all the same. It costs a lot of money to insure people, but it's an investment that needs to be made. You don't think that it smacks of socialism, Sam asked? It smacks of progression, Wells said. We owe it to our citizens. We owe it to our children. People need to know that if they get sick, they don't have to worry about going bankrupt on top of everything else. Renata straightened in her chair. Wells didn't know it, but he just opened the door. You say we owe it to our children, Sam repeated. Do you have children? 2. How old are they? I have a daughter 8 and a son who's 5. Don't you have a teenager as well, Sam asked. No. Wait a minute, you have a son with a woman named Juanita Sanchez, Sam persisted. His tone never changed. Born in 2005. That's not true. What's going on here, Sam said. I'm told it's true. Do you know Juanita Sanchez? I used to know her, Wells said. Is she your ex-girlfriend? Yes, Wells said. He waited, but Sam didn't say anything. Not a word, not a gesture. 20 seconds seemed like an hour. Wells was compelled to go on. She suggested a few years ago that I was the father to this boy, the one you're talking about. She later recanted. So you took a DNA test, Sam asked. There was no need to, Wells said. She recanted. I'm not the father. But she claimed you were at one point. Wells was growing hesitant now, defensive. We had a bitter breakup. She was upset. She's not still upset? I would hope not, Wells said. I haven't spoken to her in more than 10 years. Sam nodded. Well, I spoke to her yesterday, in fact. She doesn't seem upset, but she says you're the father. She says she never pursued the matter because you refused to show any interest in your son. She also says that you've never paid a nickel of support. He's not my son, Wells said, and she admitted that years ago. Well, she's singing a different tune today, Sam said, and she'll be singing it on this show later in the week. Let's leave it until we hear her side of things, shall we? It might come down to the DNA after all. I'll take the test, Wells said. This is ludicrous. Maybe it is and maybe it isn't, Sam said. All that concerns me is the truth. I know that you've been living in District 8 for only a year and a half. Did you leave Bed-Stuy because of these potential paternity problems? Are there any other children out there we should worry about? No, and I resent the implication, Wells replied. Sam scoffed. You come on my show singing the praises of healthcare system that will allegedly protect our children's future, and then you're offended when I ask you if you know who your children are? The people of District 8 deserve a little more transparency than that, Mr. Wells. You can't pick and choose your responsibilities the way you pick a district to run in. The segment deteriorated from there, with Sam lending all he could to the rot. Wells kept his composure, but he was out the door the moment they went to commercial. When Sam came back for the end piece, he made a speech about the need for our elected officials to be truthful in all things. He never actually called Jason Wells a liar, but he came close enough that Renata knew that there was going to be significant outrage coming their way, both from the Black community and the DNC. But she was wrong about that. Before the credits rolled, the news of the shooting came in.
That's an excellent part, and definitely key to sort of understanding the facets that sort of make up the Sam character. It also reminds me a lot of the idea behind, a courtroom setting where, a prosecuting lawyer or something like that says, something damning or very damaging to the defense, but he wasn't really allowed to say it, but it's been said out loud. And, the other lawyer says, well, I object. I want that stricken from the record. And the judge will say, sure, no problem. It's, the jury will disregard what they've just heard. You can't disregard it. You've already heard it. It's been said out loud. And that's sort of the feeling, don't you think, that Sam is trying to push in that scene, in that part of the thing where it's like, if I say it, then it's true. All I have to do is say it out loud, whether it's true or not, people will believe it. Do you feel that way? Is that sort of what you were trying to establish with this character, is that he could say anything and that in this day and age, people will just believe it?
Yeah, especially because he has the bully pulpit.
Right.
You know, he has the platform, and if you say too much in response, that he'll just cut you off.
Right.
So he
Right.
controls the narrative.
Right. And so, and obviously we've seen a lot of that in the American politics through Trump, where he's pushed his way through past people, forced his way to the front, or ignored people, not shaking their hand, or all kinds of scenarios like that. So the bully factor seems to play a huge role in Sam's character as well.
Yeah. And Sam has no moral compass.
Right.
Yeah. So that's key to his success.
Right. So it's whichever way the breeze is going to blow, he's going to go that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, it's funny because before I started tonight, I decided to take a moment and head over to Goodreads and see what people were saying about the book in Goodreads, and which is an online platform, which I think probably most people know what it is now. But for those that don't, all published books from traditional publishing houses end up on Goodreads, and it's an opportunity for people to offer up impartial, at least we hope impartial, reviews and ratings of the book. And what I found very interesting on Goodreads about your book was that there were two key aspects. The first was that people found this a much more political work than anything else you had done in the past. And I guess the question is, do you agree? And then the second portion to that is that they also really liked it. That was unexpected, but an unexpected treat. So I guess the question is, did you find that this novel was more political than, the other books that you've done?
I think that everything is political. This is more political, I guess, because it's about politics. It's the first book I've written that was specifically about politics and election. But I mean, you can talk about a farmer trying to make a living, and that can be political.
Sure.
You can talk about anybody trying to make a living in this day and age, or in any day and age, and that can be political. But yeah, in terms of, because we're dealing specifically with the guy who's running for office, it is the most political book that I've written. Yeah.
So what was that like when you're writing a Sam Jackson character, and Sam obviously is based upon the foundation that Trump has built, that ideal, but at the same time he's living in a world where Trump exists. So there is a president, but you've got Sam Jackson, who is really based on Trump himself. Am I wrong about that?
He wasn't when I wrote the first draft of this book, because actually this book has got an interesting history, as you know, Matt.
Yeah.
And he wasn't president when I wrote the first draft, and no one ever thought he could be president. It was more based on certain TV and radio personalities, more so than Trump.
Right.
It kind of dovetailed into the Trump thing when he got elected. Yeah. So when you asked about how to write the guy, one of the things I decided early on is that he's a pretty despicable character, but he's also really smart.
Yes.
And I didn't want to. It just doesn't work to have a guy who's despicable and really stupid. So he's very savvy and he's very canny, but he's got a lot of problems. But his intelligence was what, to me, makes him interesting.
So that's an interesting aspect, because a lot of people feel that Trump is not intelligent. Now here's the CNN question for you. Do you agree?
Yeah, he's not.
Okay.
People don't realize, and I don't want to get into too much Trump bashing, but he's literally, when he was elected, even some friends of mine said, he might be a good president because he's been such a successful businessman.
Right.
And all of them came to, like, a month or 2 or 3 months later, they went, oh, whoops.
Yeah.
And then when you delve into his history, he's never been a successful businessman. I mean, he's failed at everything. And when you look at, he owes hundreds of millions of dollars all over the world. And he got to the point where he's borrowing money from Russia and from the Deutsche Bank and stuff because nobody in New York or basically in the States would lend him any money because he failed at everything.
That's right.
It's almost impossible to lose money running a casino, but he did.
Yeah, that is a tough one, isn't it? How that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a question from the audience here, Brad, from Patty Timbers. So I just thought because I think it's interesting because it's the other side of the coin, is she asks, you seem to feature strong female farmers in particular to a lot of your books. I'm wondering where that comes from.
It comes from meeting you years ago, Patty.
So maybe you need to tell us a little bit about Patty Timbers then.
No, we're not going to do that. I hope she's at 4 Mile Lake and she has her wood stove going.
Oh,
I just, it's interesting you asked that because it kind of goes back to the Sam Jackson thing that I was just talking about, Patty, is it's just much more interesting to have just about any character to be like a strong, intelligent a character with resolve. And so that's what Jo is. And the other book that I brought out this year has got a very similar, not a similar character, but at least somebody with a lot of strength. And it's just, to me, more interesting and more attractive for somebody to be like that. And also in the Goliath Run, she had to be really strong to do what she did, even though what she did was wrong, and she realizes it in the end. But she had to be really strong to do that.
Yeah, there's definitely some truth to that, which we've got a poll going right now. For those of you that are seeing it, it's a question. The question is, who's your favorite character in the book? Which the 4 choices are Jo, Detective Bell, Molly, and Sam. And it's no shock that I'm going to end the poll here and share these results with everybody so that they can see that Jo came in by a large margin as number 1. So
I'm surprised that Molly didn't get any love, because there's always a character in a book that I write that surprises even me. And in this book, there was 2. There was Henry, Jo's grandfather, and Molly, because Molly was just going to be a really minor character. There was going to be like a transition from New York to Wyoming, and then started writing her, and I really enjoyed her. And I got that she was working for Sam, but she really held him in contempt, which probably happens a lot in politics.
Yes. Well, I mean, as you well know, politics is never just one man or one woman. It's the people that surround them as well. And there's a lot of that. And as you've seen, in America, right, where a lot of Trump's most staunch supporters have fled and left him. And I wonder if, somebody like Sam would have saw that in his future as well. But I have another question here from Karen Clavel. And Karen asks, would you talk a little about where you did your research for the book?
This was one where I didn't go anywhere. So it's different than when I started writing novels, obviously. The internet changed everything. So I've always been a political junkie. I get up in the morning, and there are some people out there, they think I jump out of bed and start writing. That doesn't happen. I don't know anybody that does that. I'm on the computer. I don't even have breakfast or coffee for probably an hour, and I read the New York Times and the Washington Post, and I check the ball scores, of course, during the season. And but I've always been a political junkie, and so this was sort of like, I'm not going to say it was easy for me, but it was right in my wheelhouse. So I definitely did almost all of my research. Just like, there's nothing better than reading a newspaper. But people ask me sometimes, where can you get a plot from a book? And I said, read a newspaper. If you can't find a plot in your daily newspaper, whether it's an international story or something that happened down the block from you, well, then there's something wrong, because the stories are everywhere. So I think one of the things with this book, I was getting extremely frustrated with the partisan sniping on both sides of politics, but the media as well. And that's not just in the US, that's in Canada as well. I don't know where it got to the point where it's either black or white. Like I'm either with you or I'm against you, and you say one thing and I have to say the other. And there's just so little cooperation anymore. And I don't know how we come back from that. Like, I don't know. When you elect somebody, you don't elect him to stand up in Parliament and scream at the other guy because he said something because he's with the other party. You elect him or her to try to make your life better, to try to help out what's going on. That's why they're making all that money. And it seems like there's not a lot of that going on.
No, and that's the idealism in it, isn't it? The idea behind an elected politician that's supposed to be empowered to help and not actually do more damage. But it seems that that's what we've been seeing. It's interesting too that you mentioned the history of the book. And when I say the history of the book, not the actual text itself, not the story, the actual publishing history of this book is quite interesting, because if you remember, Brad, we actually delayed it a couple of times to see what was going to happen politically on that sort of like world stage front. And we were talking just the other night about this event and how it was interesting that I was saying to you that you really could have written any scenario and it would have virtually come true. So anything that Sam did, you could have written the wildest scenario, and you talked about that too. You had talked about aspects of the book that you could have thrown in there, and at this point now, today we would be able to say, yep, those would have actually probably happened.
Yeah, it just seems like the sky's the limit, and I think one of the reasons for that is that, in spite of the fact that we've never been as well informed as we are today. Everybody is walking around with a computer in their pocket, a cell phone. And if you hear something, you can look it up on Google or whatever. For some reason, we're more ill-informed than ever. And I think it's because everybody's ADD, everybody wants sound bites. You think about when Lincoln went to the Gettysburg, okay? The Gettysburg address is about 2 minutes long, I think. And the guy that spoke before him spoke for 90 minutes. There's only one picture of Lincoln at Gettysburg, because presumably that was back in the day of collodion plate photography, where you put the glass plate in the camera and it takes some time to take a picture.
Right.
Presumably the photographer figured, well, Lincoln's going to talk for a while, because the guy that spoke before him talked for an hour and a half. Now, you just find a group of people nowadays and say, okay, I want you to sit down and listen to this politician talk for an hour and a half, and it probably won't happen.
No, they're just going to fall asleep.
They want the sound bites. They want to get it on the news at night. This guy said this thing outrageous or this. And let's go and watch reruns of whatever. Yeah,
and I guess probably Lincoln, he just had that charisma to know. He had that idea of like, I have only so much time to get these people and their attention. And I feel like Sam knows that too throughout the novel. You see him spout off a number of different times, and there's an aspect of him that is very charismatic, and he is very good at what he does, and that's probably speaking to that intellectual side, or at least intelligent side, because I know there's a lot of people would argue there's a difference between intelligence and intellectualism, and how do you feel about that with regards to the character?
Well, he's really tapped into it. Because that's sort of the nature of the beast nowadays. Like when he first goes to Wyoming and they question him on the parachute issue, like you're coming to New York and parachuting. And remember, they used to do that with Hillary Clinton in New York. And he said, well, nobody said anything when a young lawyer from Illinois parachuted into Washington in 1860. And Wally says to him, well, they didn't say anything, but half the Union seceded.
Yeah, exactly.
Sam says, well, we don't worry about that. Because he got his soundbite in there, right? He got his Lincoln soundbite in there, and it probably worked with a lot of people.
Well, I think that's why this novel is so successful with the readers, is because of the fact that there's so much truthful dialogue. And when I say truthful, what may be being said isn't actually the truth, but it rings true. It sounds true to the reader, and I think that's what makes good dialogue successful is that it may not be entirely true what you're saying. It may just be fictional, but as long as it has that impact, as long as it has that value of truth to it, And I think Sam has that in spades.
Yeah, and then people want to believe things,
They
they'll
do.
believe things that are just so illogical or improbable just because they want to believe it. I mean, you take the last 2.5 months in the States when there's no evidence that that election was fraudulent,
Mhm.
but there's millions and millions and millions of people who believe it was because they've been hearing sound bites saying it was rigged, it was rigged, it was rigged.
Yep.
And if
And it
they, like I
culminated
say, they're
in
walking
insurrection.
around with a computer in their pocket, and if
Yeah.
they really wanted to dig in and find out, what did happen in Pennsylvania, what did happen in Arizona and Wisconsin, they would see, well, yeah, there is zero evidence that anything was rigged,
Mhm.
but they don't do that. And everybody is like that. You kind of want to believe what you want to believe.
Sure you do. And it's all based on, the two big things that it's always based on, it's environment and it's your general overall upbringing, what you've been taught, right? So these things have a profound influence on what you're going to believe going forward in the future, right? And it's interesting that this character is so firmly set in his ways and what he believes in. Jen Lovering has a question for you, which I thought I would read out here.
Okay.
All of the small towns you mentioned, are they real places? It's interesting to hear you talk about Trump. The first week he was elected, I wondered how soon before he would be impeached. So I think it's more a question and a bit of commentary regarding the Trump discussion. The question is, though, all the small towns you mentioned, are they real places?
Yeah, they are. And that's another thing with research. There was a time, and actually to tell you the truth, I missed this. There was a time when I would have gone to all those small towns to find out where the farmers markets were and stuff. But I can do that with Google. And I do miss it because that's the most interesting thing about writing to me is researching, because it's to sit down at your computer every day and write for 4 or 5 hours. Nobody says I'm going to get up in the morning and write, oh boy, but traveling around and meeting people. And the best place to find out information is at a bar.
Right.
And I'm reluctant to go into a bar, I know, but I have to do it for my work. And
Yeah, you look like it. Yeah, I'm gonna say.
That's the best place to learn stuff because people are eager to talk to you.
Yeah.
And one of the things you have to remember is that probably half the stuff you're going to hear is nonsense.
Yeah, right.
You have to separate the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah.
But yeah, the answer to that question, Jan, is there are all real towns, and they are situated exactly where I had them, the hub of the wheel and that. And yeah, I'm kind of a stickler for that stuff, actually.
So is there, so I have a question for you, which I think that a lot of people would wonder about is, and it's a two-parter. This is the first half of it. The first half of it is there a point in the novel that you really like where you feel, yep, home run. This is that moment where I really nailed it. I'm really happy with the direction this is going, or maybe it's the ending. Maybe you just when you finally put the typewriter away, you just said, that's it, I got it.
That's an interesting question. I have to think about it. There's two, I think. The one is when Jo kind of breaks her wall built against the kid.
Right.
When she doesn't want it, like she says, I don't want to be her friend. I don't want to like her, because she's just so torn up because of what happened. And then she ends up buying her clothes and that. And there's that little thing in there where there's a break, where you can just see it happen. And the other thing was I kind of knew how it was going to end, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it because I didn't want a really big moment. I didn't want a really big moment bringing Sam down. And I tried to find a small moment. And it took me a long time. Like I was well into the book before I came up with the idea of the memory stick.
Right.
And that was the thing to give me, because to me it was so subtle. And I hope that it surprised the reader because they don't know what she was doing the night when she got Sam to go on his rant. Like I wanted the reader not to kind of say, why is she doing this? Why is she starting a fight with him? So that was interesting for me. I felt like that was, if not a home run, maybe a triple.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. That's good. Triple's not bad. Triple's not bad, especially for your New York fan that's out there tonight. That's a good one to have. So the second half to that question is there anything that you wish you would have included in the book and didn't? Is there any aspect that you would have changed?
No, I don't think so. I worked on this book for a long time, as you know, Matt.
Mhm.
And to me, it's a cliche, and it was somebody smarter than me said it.
Mhm.
All writing is rewriting. All good
Yeah.
writing is rewriting. And I don't look back at this and say, I wish I had done that. Like, I think the only time I would regret something is if I rushed it.
Mhm.
And I definitely
And
didn't.
you definitely didn't on this one, yeah.
No, I finessed it and finessed it. And that's another part of writing that I like is the self-editing.
Yeah.
That's really pleasurable for some reason, whereas first draft is kind of like, it's a bit of a grind.
Yeah, yeah. First draft, well, don't they always say you write the first draft with your heart and the second draft with your head? Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, yeah. And you also, I think you need to be a good self-editor nowadays because of the nature of the business.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, especially when you set something aside for a couple months and then you go back to it, you can usually say, okay, this is really working well, or this is not working,
Mm-hmm.
but you need to get that distance from it.
Yeah, and I mean, even speaking of that, we tossed around a number of titles for the book too.
Yeah, we did. It was going to be called No Surrender at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you and I were talking quite a bit, and then I got the idea of David and Goliath in my head one night, and I was
Yeah, you had sent that email.
Yeah, and you liked it right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought that there was something about that really speak to the scope of the book, right?
Yeah, because it is totally a David and Goliath, Joe being David,
Yeah.
And so yeah, I wrote a book called One-Eyed Jacks, and it came out in 2000. It was about a boxer and a torch singer, and the title of the book was That Beautiful Tennessee Waltz.
Mm-hmm.
Because the torch singer took place in the 50s, and that was one of the songs she sang. It's a Patti Page song for anybody out there who's like 80 or so. And Doubleday bought the book. The editor, Leslie Grant, loved the book, liked the title. Everything was cool. I loved the title. And then right when we were close to publishing it, Leslie called me one day and she says, the marketing people don't like the cover. They don't like the title. And I said, oh, and so marketing people, as we know, are sort of different than the artistic side.
Mm-hmm.
I think their attitude was, well, it doesn't take place in Tennessee and there ain't no waltzing. So I had to come up with a new title. And
right.
And Leslie had to talk me into it. And she was good. She was right. And I said, well, I can do that. That's not a problem. And it wasn't a problem because I came up with about 200 titles and I hated them all. I got to the point where I was waking up in the middle of the night and I would go, oh, I got it now. And I never have a pad beside my bed, but I did then. And I would write it down and I would go back to sleep and I wake up the next morning, I look at it and go, no, that's not it. And one-eyed jacks is a term that's used in the book. It's an old term for a guy who's two-faced.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the jacks in a deck of cards, two of the jacks are facing sideways.
That's right.
So you can only see one side of their face.
That's right.
One-eyed jack.
Yeah.
So that became the title. But to be totally honest with you, I still like That Beautiful Tennessee Waltz.
Yeah, it's got a nice ring to it, right?
Yeah.
But it's amazing how these things, when they, as they go, like, I think a lot of people don't realize that because all they have to do is go to the store and buy the book, right? Yeah. They don't realize that most books, I think, take at least 2 years to see their way to the shelf. Yeah. And that's not including the amount of time that it took the author to actually write the manuscript. I'm talking about, once the manuscript has been accepted by a publisher, it's anywhere from like a year to 2 years before it's going to see the light of day.
Yeah. By
that point, there's a lot that goes on. There's a lot of transition. There's a lot of evolution, and there's a lot of change that can happen. And a prime example of that is one of our other titles that we've got coming out. We had settled on a really great title for the book. And then about 3 weeks ago, Penguin released a book with the exact same title. So we changed the title. we don't want to have the exact same, and it was a unique title, so we don't want to have the exact same title as a book that's being put out by Penguin. On top of that, Penguin's book is, uniquely different than ours, so I think it would confuse
You mentioned The Return of Kid Cooper earlier. The title of that book was always Throw the Hula Hand, which is a line from an old song, like an old cowboy song. I ride an old pain, I lead an old Dan, I'm going to Montana.
Yeah.
Hula hand. And the hula hand is a lasso. And I really like that title, but we got so much feedback where everybody was saying, what is a hula hand? So finally, because it was too obscure, we ended up changing the title with that. But I am happy with The Return of Kid Cooper, the title.
Yeah, that's a great title too. I just got a note here that popped up from Daryl Bloom, who said, please don't give up the ending. He's like, I had to mute Brad for a bit there, thinking that it was, I guess he thought that maybe this was it. We were going to reveal.
No. Well, Daryl, there's flying monkeys.
Do we want to reveal the ending now, Brad, or later?
What's that?
We want to reveal the ending now or later?
Yeah.
No, we won't do it tonight. We'll definitely keep that under wraps, Daryl, and thanks for typing that in. My next question here for you is one that I wondered a little bit more about. You had mentioned how there's been so many songs, and obviously you're a music fan, and how so many songs have played a factor in the selection of your titles. So I guess where I'm going with this is, Brad, do we want to make a bit of a formal announcement that At Bay Press has your next book, which is true, but do we also want to mention the title that we're floating with and trying to work with?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the title of Brad's next book, drum roll please, is Copperhead Road, and that's a book that will be coming out later this year. And of course, Copperhead Road. Well, Brad, why don't you take it from here, because it's your title.
Yeah, there's two origins. One, the music part is there's a great Steve Earle song called Copperhead Road. Mm-hmm. But there's also, the book I should mention is about, it takes place during the Depression. It's about moonshiners and their relationship to the fledgling stock car drivers at the time. Some of the moonshine runners, who were the most skilled drivers in the world, driving those hopped up Ford coupes, became the early stock car drivers. And some of the early stock car drivers ran moonshine because there was no money in stock cars back then. So Copperhead Road, Steve Earle's song, is about moonshining, but there's also, there are a number of Copperhead roads in Appalachia, which obviously got the name from the moonshine days. So it's kind of a double whammy. It came from two different areas.
Yeah. And I personally, I love the title. So here's hoping that Penguin doesn't release anything with that title. And Karen Clavel just wrote in just a quick comment saying, great title. So you've already got one endorsement.
Probably a Steve Earle fan.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's hard not to be. And he's still making music. And then I
just ordered his new CD. I'm the last guy in the world buy CDs. So younger people out there, it's a little thing this big you can play music on. He's released an album of his son. His son died last year, Justin.
Yeah.
And Steve Earle has released an album of all, it's entirely Justin's songs.
Right, because he was a pretty accomplished musician himself.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not out yet, but I just ordered it off on the web.
Well, it'll make you happy to know, Brad, that as a collector of music, most of my catalog is on old vinyl records, and I started collecting vinyl records because they were phasing out cassette tapes into CDs, and I couldn't get the bands that I wanted on CD. Plus, I didn't have the money. CDs were so damn expensive that I could go to a garage sale and get a record for 50 cents. I have a whole bunch of Steve Earle records in my collection, and I wouldn't have paid much for them. A couple bucks here and there. Now they would be much more expensive. But in the late 80s and the early 90s, when they started phasing that stuff out,
Yeah,
I was able to scoop it all up for
that's great.
quite cheap. But going back to the poll here, poll 3, who were you rooting for? I'm about to share these results right now. And the results have been released. And it looks like everybody, for the most part, was rooting for Jo. Does that come as a
Nobody was
surprise
rooting
to you? Yeah, no, there were, well, yeah, but there were 2 people who were rooting for Vanessa and Detective Bell. So
Detective Bell, I like Detective Bell. The cops that I've written about in the past are not always that idealistic as Detective Bell.
right,
Yeah.
right, and I think that there's a bit of an aspect at the beginning of the book that kind of deals with that a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of the dynamic between him and the FBI officer.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and it kind of shines through. This was sort of going to be one of my last questions for you, Brad, here, and it's a bit of a tough one because I when I wrote it, I kept it the way I wrote it, which is it possible? And then I corrected myself. I scratched that out and I said, rather, is it believable that the Goliath Run story could ever be set in Canada? Could reality-based fiction like that ever happen on Canadian soil? Something like this. I mean, you're witnessing things like insurrections and school shootings and these terrible events that happen. And is it your opinion that just from an impact as a writer, that it makes more sense to set it in the United States because it could happen there, more like it's more likely to happen there?
Yeah, I think politically it could happen here because we're not exactly perfect when it comes to politics, you know. And
right.
Getting back to what I was talking about before about everything being so partisan. I'm sure you've watched Parliament where somebody stands up and talk and everybody starts screaming and raving at him, and that just drives you crazy. Like we're paying those people to scream and rave at each other. I think the problem would be that we don't have anything approaching a network like Sam's network, which is obviously based on Fox,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't have guys like that. I mean, there are some people, but they're not nearly as well known. So we don't have that sort of equivalent where a guy could take that leap from being a right-wing talking head or a left-wing talking head and jump into politics. I don't really see that. I mean, we've seen it.
We don't have the platform, or like we don't have the media prowess.
Yeah, maybe it's got something to do with the population. They have 10 times a bigger population, so they reach more
Right.
people, you know. But we don't really have. I mean, we certainly have people with those attitudes, but we don't have people who are kind of like superstars
Mm-hmm.
on the right or the left, you know, that everybody like household names. So
Right.
that would be the tricky part. The politics wouldn't be tricky, I don't think, because we're a lot like the States, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I hate to go back down the Trump road here, but I do want to on this one question, just because I sort of feel like it sort of needs to be asked. So as most everybody knows, sort of his final moment as he left the White House, he sort of made an announcement that, you know, we'll be back in some form or another. And do you think that that's at all possible for another story like this?
Oh, yeah. They say there's no. F. Scott Fitzgerald said there's no second acts or something. But yeah, with him, I don't know because I mean, he's all bombast and no substance. He's talking about starting a third party, which would make Democrats doing cartwheels all over the place, because if he ever started this third right-wing party, it would destroy the Republican Party. Yeah, I don't really have an answer for that. I think that's going to be a wait and see, Matt.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I would agree with you on that. It's all about timing, and I think that If anybody's proved that, it's Sam Jackson. I've got a couple questions here, Brad, for you from the attendees. The first is from Daryl Boom. He says, I was born in I believe that's North Dakota, and spent a lot of time in Montana. You have made me feel like I'm back there. Have you ever spent time in Montana?
Yeah, maybe Daryl doesn't know that the Return of Kid Cooper takes place in Montana in 1910, and I was there quite a few years ago. I was traveling around. I was on my way to ended up in Revelstoke, British Columbia, which is where I ended up teaching high school. So I was there then, and then I did a whole lot of research on Montana when I was researching Kid Cooper.
Mm-hmm. The next question actually isn't for you, Brad. It's for me, but you'll want to hear it. It's from Dave Richardson. The question is, as a fan of Brad's writing, I'd love to see him reach a huge audience. How is the book doing in the US? That's an excellent question, Dave. So at Bay Press, one of the things that we've always pushed really hard for is world rights to our authors' books, which we do have. And Brad's book is available in the US. Our US representation is SPD Books out of Berkeley, California. And SPD is a great operation for distribution. They do wonderful things, and they make sure that all of our titles are available in the US bookstores. If anybody in the US has any issues getting a hold of Brad's book, please send me an email, because we'll make sure that A, you get a copy of it directly from us, or B, we'll make sure that your bookstore starts carrying it somehow or another. But I would believe that if the book is sold out, you'll be able to get it no problem by placing an order through your bookstore. Like I said, SPD has a great sales force, and they have a pretty strong reach across the nation there, and they do a great job. In Canada, our representation is Lit Disco out of Ontario, and they do a fantastic job. We also have representation over in the UK. So if there's anybody here tonight that wants to get the book in the UK or the EU, you can get it there as well. So worldwide, the book's available. And then I would also like to say that we're just about to phase out Brad's book out of hard copy, and we will be moving it into paperback for those that prefer a little bit of a more reasonably priced edition, and that'll be coming out in about a month or so. In addition to that, Brad's book is available in, if you can believe it, every other possible format. His book is available on our website in audiobook. His book is available on our website in all ebook formats. And as well, if you can believe it, Brad's book is now available in Braille. And Brad, I think, just got his author's copy of the Braille book.
I showed that copy to young Georgia Smith and Natasha Smith yesterday. They are a couple of aspiring writers who wrote their first novel last summer. And they might be my nieces.
Oh, right on. Okay, great. So, well, at least it's nice to know that it's running in the veins.
Yes, they wrote a very, very good book. The Tale of the Maroon Dolphin.
Oh, okay. Well, then we'll have to keep our eyes peeled for this.
I'm a little worried because they're working my side of the street, you know. But.
Oh, that's great. Any last questions here for Brad as we begin to wrap up the Q&A and the discussion phase? Because I've got some great news. In a few minutes, we're going to be offering up an autographed copy to one of the lucky attendees tonight of Brad's book. So any final questions? Now's the chance to ask them. I'm going to keep my eyes peeled on the Q&A and the discussion, the chat section. But while you're looking at it now, I want to disclose something about the autographed copy. It is a pandemic, and what publishers typically do in scenarios where the author cannot be in person to officially sign the book, they will create what's called signature plates. And you are going to get a Goliath Run signature plate with Brad's signature on it that will be slid into the book as an autograph copy. We sent them out to Brad. Brad, can you confirm or deny that these were sent to you?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
The
Yes,
signature
they were
plates,
sent to me.
Brad.
I
The
have some.
signature plates, Brad. Don't do this to me.
I have some in the desk behind me. Some
Okay.
some spare signature plates.
So there's your provenance. There's your confirmation that these will be autograph book. This will be an autograph book sent out to you. One last thing. There's a little quick note here from Daryl Boom again. He just wanted to say thank you, Brad. I really like your work. And
Thanks,
that's
Daryl. I
exactly.
appreciate that.
Well, and it's no surprise either because, and I'm not afraid to toot Brad's horn here because we do represent him. The Goodreads page has Brad's book right now at 4.25 stars out of 5. So that's not a half bad rating if I do say so myself. For now though, Brad, did you have any closing comments before we select the winner of tonight's autograph copy?
No, I'd just like to thank everybody for checking in. I appreciate it, and it's been enjoyable.
Wonderful. Okay, so here we go. We're going to make this selection in 2 seconds, but before we do, I just want to let everybody know that this has been event 4 with Brad Smith talking about the Goliath Run, the Manitoba Safe at Home program. And I want to sort of echo Brad's sentiments to everybody for joining us tonight. Thank you so much. But on top of that, take care of one another out there. Stay safe, stay healthy, and try your best to stay at home because that's probably the safest place to be right now for a little bit longer. Anyway, it looks like there's some good news on the horizon. And then in addition to that, we have another great event that's coming up next Monday. These events are happening every Monday all the way through all the way through February. And the next event is with a fantastic poet out of Wasaga Beach, Ontario, Mary Barnes. She'll be talking about her first collection of poetry called What Fox Knew. So here we go. I'm going to flip through the names on our list here and randomly select somebody here. So I'm going to blindfold myself. And who do we have? We have Patty Timbers. Patty Timbers is going to get a free autographed hardcover copy of Brad Smith's first edition book, The Goliath Run. And Patty, what I'll do is I'll send you an email asking for your mailing address, and we'll get that out in the mail to you first thing tomorrow if we're able to get your mailing address. Otherwise, to everybody else, thanks again for joining us. This was a real pleasure. And I also just want to say thanks to Brad for taking the time to do this and for being a part of this great event. Brad, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.